Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. The only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its net commissions to 501c3 nonprofit organizations dedicated to fighting climate change. Well, hello, Christina. Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on. It means the world to me.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you as well.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, really happy to have you. And of course, we always love to get the show started with a little bit of background, who you are, how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Christina Gosnell. I am currently working with Cooperative. I helped found Cooperative 4 or 5 years ago now, when I was living in Boulder with a few other folks from Boulder. And we help advocates and researchers and sometimes journalists, which is always fun, access the data that they need about the electricity system. And yeah, I came into this work through climate advocacy, mostly doing local climate advocacy in Colorado with Clean Energy Action. Someone else you've emailed with Leslie Glustrom, someone else you've interviewed in the
Leslie,
past.
the
Yeah,
genius.
Leslie's such a golden human on this earth.
For sure.
Yeah. And we were doing local work in Colorado and really wanting to do like data-driven advocacy and scraping together by hand all of the data that was out there about the coal plants that exist and are spewing carbon in the atmosphere in Colorado was just really hard, and time consuming and tedious. And we got the opportunity to branch off and start a bigger project that was dedicated to making sure that there was easy and open access to climate data, mostly for the smaller folks who don't have access to pay for the large subscription service, the expensive subscription services that are out there, or the utilities themselves which have all of the data about their systems. So we started Catalyst, and I did some zigs and zags along the way, doing a bunch of energy regulation work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in my non-professional world, really love housing and affordable housing, cooperative housing, getting around by your own power or public transportation and all that kind of jazz. So I feel all things dedicated a lot of time to making sure that our systems are set up such that we can actually address climate change in a bunch of different avenues. So
very cool. Isn't the non-professional world great?
Oh yeah, it's fun. My partner always jokes with me because I always say you seem like you're working on because you're just in a bunch of meetings. I'm but those are not work meetings. It's truly us. Yeah. So
out.
Yeah.
Where you're not in Boulder anymore? Where are you now?
I'm in Philadelphia now. I moved here a little over 3 years ago now.
Very cool. Are you working remotely for Catalyst then?
Yeah, we've been a pretty small and scattered team for a while. So we've been working remote for a while now.
Very cool. And where are you from originally?
I'm from Maryland originally, just outside of Baltimore.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit closer to home, and definitely back in the land of brick buildings and
totally
trains. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's your passion in the climate action stuff really originate? Any interesting stories?
It's hard for me to pinpoint the beginning, but because I certainly came of political age and awareness in our current climate crisis. So
mm-hmm.
I'm about to be 31 now. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and even in high school, it was very clear this is something that I need to dedicate as much time as possible to, basically, because it's kind of make or break for our future. So it's
kind of
started
important.
along. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, I really I went to CU Boulder and
studied
woo. I studied environmental studies and
Right.
political science, and like I kind of chose electricity as a space because it was like, we have two main emission contributors in the US, like electricity and transportation, and electricity at the time was the largest contributor. So, and also it's like it's simpler.
Hmm.
Like even though
I
like
like that.
despite the complexities of the electricity system, which I like love to nerd out about, like it is a simpler transition than the transportation sector. So yeah, so I dove in.
Can we nerd out about that a little bit for a second? Because I was just going for a walk with my friend this morning, and I'm like looking at these power lines that are just like, they line the streets, and we totally just take them for granted. And I'm from New Jersey, and back on the East Coast, we would have like snow days or storms, and trees would like come and like knock down the power line, and then power would go out for like 2 days, and that was just like a normal thing that would happen back in Ringwood, New Jersey, which is like the border between New York and New Jersey. But it just seems like first off, I don't even know how these power lines work. Second of all, like, it seems like there could be like a better way than just these like thin wires to transport all this energy. I don't know. I figured I would throw that at you and see what you say.
Yeah, the lines that you see in like neighborhoods are the distribution network. Um, and so there's like the grid has like kind of two main components. It's the transmission network and the distribution network. And when it's like in neighborhoods, like there's like, big power, the traditional old school version of the grid, which is still largely the physical infrastructure of the grid, is like big power plants over here, load center over here, big transmission lines from power plant to substation. Substation is like the place where they kind of convert the electricity to a lower wattage so it can actually go into your home and not
Doesn't blow up the house.
blow everything. Yeah, actually make a bunch of
That's
electrical fire.
distribution line.
Yeah, so like
That's
transmission is
outside our
like the
house.
long distance one, and the distribution grid is to like in neighborhoods actually delivers electricity to your home and businesses. Um, and yeah, I think that the biggest move around distribution networks is actually like in especially places that are prone to a lot of snow, prone to a lot of storms, like undergrounding them makes them much more.
That's what my friend said. He's like, it seems like it
Yeah.
makes more sense. It
Yeah,
was expensive.
it is expensive. Yeah, it's quite expensive, and also it just depends. Yeah, I think actually Fort Collins moved to underground their distribution network, and they decided to do that knowing that it was going to be quite expensive, but knowing that like that was the thing that they decided to value. Um, yeah, it's a trade-off for sure. Like I think that, yeah, it's really a question of whether or not a community values those like relatively infrequent but high impact days,
Mm-hmm.
and where the costs are going to be incurred. Because generally speaking, those costs come from the ratepayers, and yeah, so it's a cost question generally speaking. Also, like moving more generation on the distribution side, like actually having more solar panels on houses makes the distribution network much more robust in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways, especially if you design it right. Um, so that also helps those kind of like peak days, and also those storm moments. So
Right. I had no idea what the cost benefits analysis for something like that, but that's just funny that we were just talking about that before. All right, cool. Before we kind of dive into Catalyst, let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got to be doing what you're
yeah,
doing, like, more in depth, I guess.
sure.
So can you
Mhm.
tell me about like what you were doing at E9 Insight?
Yeah. E9 Insight is a small consulting company that um, they help uh, a wide range of clients kind of help them navigate the electricity regulatory system. So most states have a regulatory body that regulates the electricity system. They're usually called public utilities commissions. In Colorado, they're called public utilities commissions, or PUCs, PUCs. And that's where a lot of the like nitty gritty in the weeds, but in very important decision making happens. A lot of times, like the legislature will pass kind of broad sweeping kind of proclamations, and then the PUC is where all of the implementation happens. Also, where all of the rate making happens. So most of the nitty gritty decisions about the electricity system happen at the PUCs. And yeah, E9 Insight, we helped like nonprofit clients, research institutions like government labs and stuff, as well as like private sector folks. Those are mostly like kind of grid edge, demand side management, energy efficiency companies, and some renewable developers as well, like understand that space. It probably won't surprise anyone to know that our electricity regulation and policies are like not well set up for renewable energy and and energy efficiency. Just like they're not well structured for that. And so it's really, I got to work with a lot of folks who were like, I have this like really cool technology. It's going to save customers money. It's going to save a tremendous quantity of electricity. And actually there's no market for it because that is not actually super attractive to utilities, and the utilities are the ones that have to like install it in their system. And so it was like helping folks navigate the existing rules and sometimes helping folks understand like where things need to change, so that they could do their own kind of advocacy push. Yeah, it was super fun. It was started, E9 was started in also in Boulder, actually. Yeah, also in Boulder. Cameron Brooks is the founder and president or whatever, and he's great. Wealth of knowledge. I feel like I got a crash course, generally speaking, in PUC regulation across the country to understand like what different states were doing, who was moving quickly, who was using like sort of nitty gritty, like interesting incentives versus who was just like, you must do this, utility X. Right. And I, got to watch the downside actors like play with those rules and like see which ones were easy to navigate and challenging. So I it was really interesting and fun to get to help folks and just understand more about the electricity system, and this like really important place in the like policy and decision making universe that like is pretty opaque and has like really few decision makers overall, but has a huge impact.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying like it was really fun, and I'm like, I gotta know about that. But then you mentioned that you were like helping people, and then you're like, oh, okay, you're helping people navigate this complex stuff that is really important. But I don't know anyone kind of working on like the utility side. What was that kind of like environment like? What are the people like who are working on this stuff?
Yeah, we definitely had a mix. Like I got to work with a mix of folks who were trying to sell directly to like renewable energy directly to consumers, who were like much more kind of that's like a very, because of the way our system is set up and because of how utilities make their money, like that's an adversarial relationship with the utilities. Like utilities don't want that to happen. They want to control the generation. They want more electricity sold, and that's just like how the incentives are structured. To folks who are like, selling AMI like advanced meters to utilities, and then those utilities were installing them on their systems, and those folks like necessarily needed to work much more in tandem with the utilities. But yeah, it was, E9 as an institution is like tries to stay relatively neutral, as tries to be. Yeah, and like Cameron has a consulting business that like where he has his own sort of opinions and like helps folks do that actual direct advocacy. But E9, in some ways it was easy for me to be like, I'm going to tell you what's going on. You can do what you want with it. And in the process, like I'm learning a tremendous amount about the system and developing my own opinions that like I will maybe tell you if you ask for them.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah, we'll write them down and like stamp them with my E9 stamp. But but yeah, basically I did a lot of translation of like big dense PDFs
Right on.
that the commissions were putting out into like small, digestible, human readable content. So
I'm seeing how this leads to your next project. So
yeah.
can you tell me, and is it Catalyst Co-op? Is that right? Or Catalyst
Yeah.
Coop?
Catalyst Cooperative. Yeah. Catalyst Co-op.
Catalyst Cooperative. So what is Catalyst Cooperative? How did you get involved with it? What was it like being the co-founder? All that jazz.
Yeah. Ooh, Catalyst origin story. Yeah. So I actually, so I helped start Catalyst Co-op. Actually, like this was actually my pre-E9 work. So like before I started working at E9,
Stuck with it.
I know, yeah, I was working at Clean Energy Action, and in Boulder, and we were like trying to compile a bunch of data about the coal plants in Colorado, Excel's coal plants specifically, to find the ones that were like good targets for advocacy. Yeah, and specifically we're trying to find the ones that had were good targets and didn't have a tremendous quantity of capital still tied up in them. Like capital is the undepreciated capital, which is like how much capital the utility still needs to like recoup from the ratepayers. Yeah, undepreciated capital is like a big barrier for utilities specifically to like want to close plants.
They don't want to lose money.
They don't want to lose money. It's a if they close it early and then there's this like big chunk of capital, typically utilities just to get to turn things into what's called a regulatory asset, which is to say they get to collect on it, but it's a fabricated asset.
Collect from who? The government?
The ratepayers.
From so us.
Yeah. You, me, all of us.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a weird game of like, especially like integrated utilities that are regulated by their commissions. Like they get a guaranteed rate of return, and that's set by the commission, which like no other industry gets. And when they spend money, they are like entitled in this like regulatory compact, like this regulatory agreement that we have all entered in, whether or not we know about it or not, that they're gonna, like, if they spend money, they're gonna get their money back with a rate of return. And so like utilities build plants with the expectation that like they're not going to recoup all of that money year one, because that would be a gigantic rate impact, but they depreciate it over time and collect the money over time from the ratepayers. And if you retire a plant 10 years early, you have 10 years worth of undepreciated asset to recoup, but there's no asset lying around anymore. So yeah, we were working with a group of folks who were like doing capital recycling or like securitization, trying to figure out ways to remove that barrier in ways that were like generally equitable, but that the utilities wouldn't put up a gigantic fight about, because you will probably be unsurprised to know that like utilities have a ton of power and just like kind of political weight in these decision-making processes, even though it's like they're helping regulate themselves. It would be great if they had, in my opinion, it would be great if they had less power in these decisions.
They sound like they are part of the government, but they're also private companies at the same time, at least in the state of Colorado.
They're fully private. Like Xcel is the utility for the large majority of Colorado, especially the Colorado like electricity and residents. And they are private, like they're a private company, they're privately held. They're actually I think Xcel is a publicly traded company, but they are this, like, they're public utility. Like they are providing a service that we all think of as a like baseline, because we have, you know, even from like the 20s and 30s, we have said like we are going to electrify America. We are going to make these utilities that have these like kind of special rights in the economy. And ensure that like we enabled monopolies, and in enabling monopolies, we created these public utility commissions to regulate them. But as with a lot of like regulatory spaces, like the utility has all of the incentive to try to deeply influence those like political decisions and regulatory decisions, and they have all the time and money to do that too. So yeah, they have a big impact. They also know all of the information about their system. And they can share that like or not if it's not favorable to them, which is like honestly like this is a part of the reason we started Catalyst, is because like the sort of like the sort of advocates don't have access to the data that the utilities have about their own systems in these like deeply technocratic regulatory spaces. So we wanted to like attempt to right that imbalance a little bit.
Publicize the data.
Yeah, and make sure that the advocates got decent enough data to make their points, and like run their own models, and like make their own assumptions and question the utilities assumptions, such that we can attempt to level the playing field a little bit.
You are awesome. Okay, I get it. Are these regulatory committees seated by the public utilities? Like, are the people who own the private corporations in the committees?
No. So in most states, the governor appoints the public utilities commissioners. Usually there's only there's like 3 to 5 in most states. So like it's a very small number of actual individuals making these decisions. Typically the governor appoints them. Obviously utilities lobby for individuals to get, like the utilities will necessarily lobby the governors to have like favorable commissioners, and most states the appointments need to be approved by the legislative bodies. There are some states that elect their public utilities commissioners, which has its upsides and downsides. But in a good example is actually Arizona, when the utilities basically like propped up a few candidates in one of their last elections, and against some like pretty pro solar folks who are running for the commission, and they spend a ton of money in the election of their commissioners. So it gets a little bit honestly more tricky and messy when the commissioners are elected. But yeah, they don't have the utilities don't have like direct appointment power or whatever of the commissioners, but they're
interested.
Again, they're interested. They operate in the political system. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how it works outside the US?
I know that there are similar like regulatory bodies in other countries. There certainly is in like Canada. Canada has similar, like that's kind of the largest context I have is of Canada, which like each of their provinces have similar bodies and federal bodies as well. But that's kind of all of the context that I have, to be honest. So I don't know.
So does Excel extract fossil fuels in addition to like refining them and providing energy? Like, how does it like work? Like, I'm thinking about like, where is it government, where is it business, and where does it make sense for it to be one or the other? Because we need electricity and we need someone to find the source. So I don't know. I'm trying to work through all the logistics of how this works.
Yeah, largely Excel does not actually, I think entirely Excel does not actually extract any.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, they buy, they have like short-term and long-term contracts for coal and natural gas, typically from other private actors. And this is a fun fact. This is one of my like soapbox things, hills that I'll die on. Most utilities, including Excel, directly pass the cost of fuel directly onto ratepayers. So they have, like financially, they don't care how expensive or inexpensive their fuel is. It like is it's a direct pass through. It's in Colorado, it's through this thing called the electric commodity adjustment. So literally each quarter or month, they like adjust the line on your bill, which is basically fuel. And so they don't care if the fuel prices get really expensive. They also don't care to like find super cheap options or no cost fuel options. It just is not in their incentive structure to keep that low. That comes up, like it matters peripherally to them, because if rates skyrocket, like consumers will complain, as they should, but it's not actually like in their financial interest to care. So it doesn't matter to them if coal costs go up. And it also doesn't really kind of constitutionally matter to them to like transition away to no fuel electricity sources. Although the no fuel electricity sources, if they do get to own them, they're like entirely capital costs, and capital costs mean earning a rate of return for them. So like they do have actually kind of a constitutional incentive to want to move that way, but they've just generally been slow on the uptick in that regard. So yeah, that was long.
I love talking about this kind of stuff because I don't know anything about any of this, and you've like been studying this stuff and you've figured out how to like. So are you a nonprofit or a for-profit business?
So Catalyst is a technically for-profit business. It's a like registered as a cooperative in Colorado, which is like a traditional business, but we are like one member, one vote. And there's some like rules around what makes a co-op in Colorado. So,
but your like mission is to like publicize previously unavailable data, right? So like, who are your customers then?
Yeah, so Catalyst is like is about half funded through grants and like foundation funding. And because we are making open source data products, and we are, as you have probably noticed, have like very much have like a public interest mission at our core. Yeah. And so we're about half funded through research, through foundations, and the other side is like our consulting work. And the consulting work largely is with advocates and like nonprofits who are trying to do that data-driven advocacy and want like more, our data, we're kind of always trying to compile more and like make it more and more useful, but like there's always more to compile and more analysis to do on top of the data. So most of our clients are like basically asking for kind of different aggregations or new analysis to that we can build on top of the data. So yeah, it's partial nonprofits and advocates, and then some like research institutions. So either government research labs or some academic research labs who like want to do like deep decarbonization models for like what kind of resource we would build on the grid, and they need to understand our existing system in order to do that. So they use our data to do that economic dispatch modeling.
I love this. This is so cool. Like I'm talking to like all the people who are like finding these things that need to be done to like decarbonize, and like I love how I don't even know what to say. Let's talk about the public utility data liberation project. How's that going? How to get started? What's going on?
Yeah, so it got started when we were like trying to hand scrape a bunch of data for Colorado, and we realized how much toil and time was going into this like really manual data preparation for ourselves. And also like we had talked to a bunch of other advocates and other academic researchers who was like, we all have to do this like annoying like curation of the like public openly accessible data. But like if data is not relatively usable, it's like, is it public? Like, is it like, there's a paywall there that is just individuals' time. So we got the opportunity through our partners that were like trying to do refinancing, general like refinancing out of like early retirements and refinancing out of coal plants. Like they wanted to focus on more than just Colorado and just like do a US based advocacy push basically. And we were like, we would love to keep doing your data compilation, but we can't do it manually. We can't do it manually in a way that is going to be like efficient for anyone. So we were like a subcontractor on a grant that like helped us kickstart Catalyst to build this like public data, open public data tool. Called Puddle. It's the Public Utility Data Liberation Project.
Hype.
It's yeah.
Hype.
And yeah, the first few years it was like touch and go. Like I was partially working. I was mostly working at E9 in the early days because we had like stop and go funding. But yeah, so early days we focused on like getting data into one uniform place. We largely focused on data about the like the existing fossil infrastructure, so like gas and natural gas and coal plants, and their like operational and capital characteristics. So like how much capital is tied up in the plant, how much money is being poured into it every single year for like upgrades and whatever, and just how expensive is a plant to run. So the like fuel costs is the biggest factor there, but also like kind of minor maintenance and kind of paying the employees that work there and that kind of jazz is the like the capital side and the operational side of the data. That was our initial push. And yeah, we've largely like kind of compiled a lot of that data in ways that are relatively like usable and ready for analysis. Since then, we've like added emissions data from the EPA and much more data about utilities broadly. So like there's the Energy Information Administration is a federal agency that's run by the Department of Energy that like publishes data each year about the electricity system and the gas system, and their data is honestly like pretty good, but they publish it each year and a lot of folks want to like do multi-year analyses, so we grab every single year of data, squish it together, and like do some cleaning and imputations and like make it a little bit more accessible to folks. So our initial focus was really like get the data in one place, clean it up, make it like generally speaking analysis ready. We are now, thank goodness, finally in a place where like we're moving away from like just get the data in a place to like make sure the data that we do have is accessible, and like publish it and distribute it in ways that like are much more like right now, like, you know, a year and a half ago, you would have to like go on the command line and like run some scripts. And that's not, that certainly wouldn't have served my past self, you know, like who I was like strictly a spreadsheet user. And that was like where my skills were. And also that's all I really needed to know to do my job. So we're moving more and more towards like making a wide range of distribution platforms, or like using a wide range of distribution platforms. So our data can like reach folks with varying different like technical skill levels, basically. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, making it a lot more useful. Yeah. Very interesting. How do you think we can like use data to like create more efficient systems? Yeah, because if anyone's in business, like they know, like we should, if they're in business, you got to know by now that like data is like the new like gold. Like it can tell you so much, whether it be about your customers, how your product works and everything. Like data is not even like the future. It's like the last 40 years. It's the present. I don't know.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm honestly I try to tell two stories kind of concurrently about data, especially in like political advocacy context. Data can't make decisions for us. It can't. Like we as humans, like use the information that we have access to make values-based decisions about what to do with the information that we have. So like you can see all the climate data that you possibly can and still not want to act on climate change because it doesn't align with your values. So like data can't solve any of our problems. But I think especially in these like technocratic policy spaces and like regulatory spaces, data is being used to data is often being used by utilities or other actors that have different values than me, certainly, especially about like the future of our climate. Data is being used by them to make values-based claims about what needs to happen in the future. And like our theory of change is that giving actors that like actually care about climate and deeply care about climate, and also ratepayers and like their like ratepayer impacts, giving those folks data so that they can play that same like, hey, look, I have the information that and I've done my homework, I have done my modeling, I know that this is feasible and possible, and we should move, and like we should deeply consider this other option. That's been our kind of theory of change. We're like, give data to the people that we know can make those like eloquent policy proposals in spaces that right now they don't really have the same like data footing as their kind of counterparts. So
Yeah, they probably don't have the time and resources to go through and sort through like terabytes and terabytes of information. So yeah. Bless you guys for providing an awesome utility, I might call it. But yeah, so let's end the show by talking about some of your personal opinions, because I'd love to hear it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. You're a very happy person, which is nice. I want to ask you, what do you think some of the most important lessons you've learned in your like 10-year plus career working to advance like climate and energy policy?
Yeah, I think that that's a tough one, because I lately I've been a little so I'm happy, but I've also been like a little despondent, honestly, about our ability to like do collective action in a way that is like moves us forward. Yeah. As I said before,
it's exhausting.
It is like, and like I've been like professionally really focused on the electricity sector, and there's a lot of movement there, and that feels encouraging. But there's like, we're not moving fast enough at all.
Let's dive into this. Let's talk about like your despair and stuff over climate change. I mean, it's totally normal. Like for me, it like so fluctuates real on the day. But like, what is getting you down the most? And let's see if we can even just talk about maybe how to get around that.
Yeah, I think that so yeah, the electricity side of things, like it's moving slow, and there are big actors that are like the big bad guys of sorts, where like it's fossil fuel industry and the utilities, and it's like clear that these legal entities their incentives are aligned for our future being sustainable and prosperous, and it's easy to be like, it's easy for me to imagine different economic models and like different regulation that makes their influence over the regulation a little bit less, and also just like realigns their incentives to make sure that they're not like carbon burning machines like that. It's easy for me to understand their actions. And then on the transportation and like housing side of things, like I've like I'm much more nervous, honestly, about that side of our transition. Because it's not like the big bad. Developers are sometimes a giant pain and like do and also have incentives that aren't necessarily aligned with certainly with affordability always, but like the bad guy, like my bad guys, like the barrier that I see to like kind of more walkability, more like transit oriented neighborhoods, like it's mostly homeowners who are scared of like the changing nature of their neighborhoods. And that happens everywhere. Like I experienced it really big time in Boulder. And have a lot of like individual personal connections with folks that I like, really um, tried to like much more deeply understand as humans, like where their motivations were coming from. But yeah, I just feel like that space, like I don't, it's hard because there are these like big things that we probably should do that like require a lot of change, and change is scary for humans.
It
And
also happens all the time.
yes, like a version of similar to climate change, like housing affordability is like one of those things that like if you don't do anything about it, like something is happening, like you're deciding to not do anything about it, and therefore things are going to get more expensive. And yeah, and that's it's really sad. It's sad to watch like people who are really lovely and like care about like honestly, I watched a lot of the people who I like admired and cared about and like looked up to in a lot of ways in what they were doing with like energy advocacy and like renewable energy work, just like directly turn around. And when it came to housing, like there was no way that there was no future for me in Boulder. Like I left in large part because it was very clear that I wasn't going to be able to find stable housing, and none of my friends were either. And like, yeah, it just sucks. And it is happening everywhere. Like Boulder is not a unique case in this regard by any means. It's just like kind of far down that path where it's like very hard and kind of untenable for a lot of folks. So
Yeah. Well, you're getting into like wealth inequality. Like there's a lot of like humanitarian issues. I'm like wondering if like you're thinking things aren't going to change when it comes to like environmental stewardship or living in reciprocity with the land, and more of like greedy capitalists. We all only care about ourselves. Because I've like going through this podcast, talking to all sorts of different people. I've like dove deep into like what is this. I'm a philosophy minor as well, so I like this stuff. But when it comes to like my business venture, I've decided to become narrowly focused. Specifically, it's like CO2, like carbon, because that's like one thing that I think can help like everyone at the same time. So rather than trying to like figure out how to fix like life, I'm just like, okay, the climate system is warming. That generally leads to like more death. If I like can cool that down, we'll be good. So I'm pretty optimistic on that, unlike a lot of people who are like, oh, we're too late, we're screwed. I'm interested in regenerative.
Can't be in that headspace. Yeah.
No, like regenerative agriculture, carbon sequestration, direct air capture. Like I really think there's a lot of opportunities, both socially and economically, to fix the climate. So I'm not like in despair on that. But then if you go into like biodiversity and like how much land usage we're in, so like I'm like wondering where you're like getting like most caught up in.
Yeah, I think that I get frustrated sometimes when people are like, especially certainly like a lefty. Like I get sometimes I get annoyed when people are like, we have to change, we have to like break down capitalism in order to fix the climate because capitalism caused climate change. And also like we kind of do, like there are slices of
break it down.
Like, it's like I don't think our like economic system is only working for few. And and that shows up and plays out in like so many different places, and it's causing so much harm along the way. And I think that it seems to me like a big part of the reason that there's so much fear around change in this country, but also around the world, is that like we are scared that we're not going to get our needs met, and we're scared that we're going to be, like conditions are going to change so materially that we're not going to get our material needs met, and that's scary. Like that's a reasonable fear, especially in this country when there are so many people who are like truly on the brink of economic catastrophe. Like it's not. I personally think that it's been a positive change to like have the environmental community like more and more think and care about and notice that there are like economic and racial disparities in the world, and that like those can't be ignored when we're thinking about climate change. Like all climate change is like so interwoven, like the solutions to climate change are so interwoven with so many parts of our economy, that like we need to pay attention. we like we need to pay attention to all of the like intricacies of how these potential changes would impact people's lives. And like sometimes we need to say like some people's like the harm that's going to be caused by some people is like, or to some people, is like more important. Like certain harm is more important than others, and I think we have a really hard time of like assessing harm and risk and like weighing them and being honest about that. Or like, like it's. I think that we need to be in some ways like if someone is like really, really upset about the color of a building, but like that color is going to cause like a tremendous quantity of benefit to many individuals, like
fuck them.
Paint the building. Like, like it's, so I think that we need to get a little bit better.
But should we force people to paint the building if someone privately owns it?
Sometimes maybe it depends on how big of an impact it would have. Like if it is like, I am certainly not above those like more like we must do this, and I think I've come to that over time, especially from watching utilities in particular like skirt around or like like do this like lovely dance around their like incentive-based regulations. Sometimes you just gotta tell people what has to happen because it's
important.
Yeah.
Christina, you're a delight to talk to. I just want you to know that. It's been a pleasure. Obviously I have my own thoughts on what you're saying, but this show is not about me saying my thoughts. I do that enough in my vlogs and videos. Tell me about this vision that you would have for the future if you could kind of engineer things. You could focus on utilities and electricity if you want, or just I'm just really interested. Like I'm definitely picking up the vibe you're putting down, but like what would an idealized version kind of look like to you?
It's hard for me to not start that like my vision of an idealized world with like an understand like a revisioning of what is sort of a good life for individuals, because I think that for me that like really grounds a vision of a future. Like I would love to live in a world in which like individuals had more time and maybe less things.
Are you into like degrowth?
Many of the tenets of degrowth are very attractive to me. I haven't like explored the philosophy enough, to be honest, to like there are still big questions that I have about degrowth, to be honest, especially around like mass mobilization around climate solutions, and the like, there are like, I think the US needs degrowth, but like, does India? No, like, I don't, like, there are like, and maybe eventually, or like, there's I think we need a rebalancing of what is a good life. And I think that, yeah, this like rat race that we all play in the US, that
Kind of sucks.
it just sucks. Yeah, like I want more free time to like do the things I care about and like go on bike rides, and like spend time with my loved ones, and yeah, and really like center the like care and care and community. And that is a kind of, it doesn't need to be like, we could get there in a way that wasn't a radical reimagining of the US economy, but like, I think in a way that is a radical reimagining of the US economy, in a way that like,
it's always being reimagined by the next generation that comes up. Have you ever been to Sweden?
I have not been to Sweden.
You might want to look into it. It's an interesting place. Yeah, you might enjoy that.
Grand.
Very cool.
New travel plan post
whatever this is.
Post-pandemic. Post-pandemic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I get it. I could definitely get on board with free time and loved ones. So I appreciate you sharing. Back to more pragmatic stuff. Important climate actions or policies you think are most effective to actually get substantive action? Anything comes to mind?
I think that we need like broad renewable energy targets, like across the board. Like, we know that they work. We know that they just like, there are a bunch of like fiddling around the edges that folks are doing at commissions, which I find really like fascinating and important. And also like, we need to retire coal and we need to retire gas plants, largely speaking. Like, we need to move, and we need to move swiftly. And I think that like mandates in that context work really well. So in the electricity space, I like just mandate that the utilities provide renewable energy, especially right now that that we know that can happen in almost all places in an economically efficient way for ratepayers. That's really like number one. And I think that there's a ton of like more nuanced and interesting like policy initiatives that I find attractive. Like, I think that finding ways to actually value distributed resources like solar on a roof, but in ways that can like grow into the future, and it can be robust, and like, we're not just like kind of profligately putting like right now we need to like put solar wherever we can imagine, and like eventually we need to like choose wisely, like eventually once the system gets like 10% distributed resource, like we're so far away from that universe, and like those eventualities have really interesting like nuanced technical like questions and solutions, but for now like we need to just blanket things. So yeah, and I this is kind of more meta, but I also think that like, I think states can and should fund public interest groups being at public utilities commissions. A few states do this right now, but like, it's hard to scrape together the resources to show up in a meaningful way in those spaces. Utilities have kind of not an endless, but like a large pile of their profits to like use in those spaces. And if we understand the like political economies of those spaces, we should also value the other folks who are like attempting to balance the utilities opinions. That's kind of a meta thing, but I think it's important.
No, your perspective's awesome. I really appreciate it. It's been really great chatting with you as expected. Final question is always just what advice do you have for young people who are passionate about creating a positive impact? Because we can do it if we keep trying.
We definitely can. um, yeah, I guess as a almost 31-year-old, like I'm officially like not in the young bucket.
Yes, you
Um,
are.
I know. I'm like, it's a 35 or
If
whatever.
you're a millennial, you're in the club. You're fine.
Definitely millennial, squarely millennial. Yeah, I think that for me, it was really important to take time to like there's two sides of how I chose my path to walk down. One was like what is going to provide the biggest impact, and for that I like took time to attempt to understand like the electricity system is a big problem, and it's like not technology that's in the way, it's policy. um and and then there's the other side of that coin, which is like, what do you like to do? Like I kept finding myself like playing in spreadsheets, try to answer questions. And like now all day I get to like play in data, not in spreadsheets anymore, but like just play in data to answer questions. And um, so yeah, both sides of those of that coin of like, what do you think is important, and what are you like drawn to in terms of tasks, because like work is always going to feel like work, like it's going to be work, but you hopefully will enjoy it to a degree. um yeah, also, student debt is a giant problem. And like I was really lucky because I got a tremendous quantity of like scholarships and grants to like, I didn't come out of undergrad with a saddled with a tremendous quantity of debt. And for folks that are like walking into their and for me, because of that, I was able to like take lower paying jobs thought had that I thought had a much bigger impact, um, much bigger positive impact. So yeah, finding ways where you could like not be super duper in debt, which is like a terrible piece of advice for folks who are already in debt.
Not go to college. Could not go to college. I mean,
Yeah.
YouTube is pretty cool. I'm just
Yeah, and
throwing
like
that out
finding
there.
ways to, if you're walking into, if you want to, if like you want to go to college, because some fields like need a degree and some don't, and it's important to walk into college knowing that like I want to get this specific degree, because I want this end. And I don't think we give young people enough like space to make that decision. Well, they're kind of just like, I was certainly like just funneled into undergrad. I was kind of laser focused, so like I knew what I wanted to do. But a lot of folks aren't, and that's okay. It's okay for them to like take a waitressing job or like whatever, like wait a tiny bit to like understand what they actually want to do with themselves. And it's okay to change that. It's okay to like, not know and change your decision. But trying to figure out ways to navigate life so that you can like not need to maximize your income, is will end up opening opportunities in terms of actual like climate impact.
I could not agree more. And it was absolutely delightful having you on the show today, Christina. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. It really meant the world to me. And thank you for sharing, talking about, we hardly ever talked about like the logistics of utility. So thanks for sharing that and sharing it with a smile. It makes it much more digestible for people.
I try hard to make things like semi communicable. Sometimes I get a little lost in the weeds, but this was super fun. I appreciate these questions, and it's been fun to
Go for it.
rattle on
You were
really
doing it.
about all these things that I care a lot about.
Yeah. And we appreciate you. So thanks so much for coming on. And of course, everyone, we will see you next week because we are doing 2 episodes a week now. Cha-ching. Let's go. See you on whatever the next day is of changing the climate. Y'all have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate. Here at Climate Change Realty, we don't just donate 50% of our net commissions to fight climate change, we also donate a full 50% of our real estate referrals. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.